We weren't. It required me to do something else. Greetings. Welcome to our second in the series of Speculative Sunday poetry readings. My name is Akua Leslie Hope, and I greet you from the ancestral land of the Onondaga, also known as the Seneca, keepers of the Western Door in the area currently called the Southern Finger Lakes region of New York State, where the hour is just 2 minutes past 7. I pay respect to the Seneca people, past, present, and future. Let me be resonant with the process of dismantling colonialist amnesia. I offer gratitude to all those who have gone before, by whose courage and resilience I was created and am sustained. This is our second reading in the series, and I am delighted to introduce Wendy Van Camp. Wendy Van Camp is the creator behind No Wasted Ink, a blog about the craft of writing that features author interviews, sci-fi and fantasy book reviews, and poetry. Her short stories have appeared in Lit Up, Sci-Fi Est, Quantum Visions, and Far Horizons. And let me stop sharing for a moment so you may see Wendy. Okay, her short stories and poems have appeared in Lit Up, Sci-Fi Est, Quantum Visions, and Far Horizons. She's published The Curate's Brother, a Jane Austen variation of Persuasion, a Regency historical novel, and The Planets, an Elgin nominated Sci-Fi poetry collection. A graduate of the James Gunn Speculative Fiction Workshop, Wendy has won honorable mention at the Writers of the Future contest and has been nominated for an Elgin Award, as I mentioned. She makes her home in Southern California with her husband and a beautiful, mischievous cat. She enjoys travel, urban sketching, and jewelry making. She is multi-talented, multi-genre, but she's here to share her sci-fi with us. Thank you and welcome, Wendy.
Well, thank you, Akua. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I will be silent and you may begin when you feel like it.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you again. Well, after that introduction, I guess I don't need to say too much more about myself. I'm going to go ahead and get started with the poetry. The first poem I thought I would read for you this evening is something that I published this last June in a magazine called the Starlight Emporium magazine. Beautiful art magazine, full of very talented creatives, both as artists, as writers, and as poets, such as myself. The funny thing is, I didn't actually apply. The editor came to me. She wanted to have a poem to commemorate the SpaceX launch that happened just literally a week or two before her issue was to come out. And she needed to find a poet who could, one, get a poem done within a week and sent to her for review, and two, who basically knew how to write astropoetry. So she just put out the word, and a friend of mine said, hey, I know of somebody that writes astropoetry, Wendy Van Camp. So he put us in touch with each other. And basically, this is what I came up for her, and it published in the summer issue, literally a week later. It's a 3-part poem called From Pad 39A, and it's in 3 parts. And it gets the title because the SpaceX launch, as well as the other ones I talk about in the poem, all came from the same place. They all came from pad 39A. The first one is called Apollo. At dawn, the monolith rises with brave men to ascend the heavens. We will journey to the moon. The nation holds its collective breath as television cameras spy. At dawn, the monolith rises with brave men to ascend the heavens. On magnificent blossoms of fire, Kennedy's dream comes to life. We see our world with new eyes. At dawn, the monolith rises with brave men to ascend the heavens. We will journey to the moon. And part 2, I call Endeavor. Over and over, the flying brick transports humans into orbit, landing home after her mission. When the Challenger explodes, we grow fearful of outer space. Over and over, the flying brick transports humans into orbit. Astronauts float in the space station, performing great experiments the earthbound do not comprehend. Over and over, the flying brick transports humans into orbit, landing home after her mission. And part 3 is called Dragon. The rising dragon is a javelin, with precision pierces the sky, leaping forth from pad 39A. Despite masks and social distance, the nation relives Apollo mystique. The rising dragon is a javelin, with precision pierces the sky. Former shuttle pilots rename SpaceX craft their Endeavor, bringing the past into the future. The rising dragon is a javelin, with precision pierces the sky, leaping forth from pad 39A. And that's the end of that one. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next ones. Now, these next 2 poems were both published in a magazine called Lit Up, which unfortunately is no longer with us, which is a shame. It was a nice magazine. It was online, and then they would select poems to put into an anthology and print at a later time. Both of these published back in 2018. The first one, oh, excuse me, print's a little small. I'm going to get my glasses off here. The first one is called He Is Your Brother. And this one was inspired by the Clone Wars on TV, the Star Wars franchise. But also, I used an ABBA song, because this was written in a challenge using the songs of ABBA selected by the person running the challenge. And we would have to incorporate the song title and use the title of the song as the title of our either short story or poem. So this is what I came up with from the ABBA song. I do not wear chains, but I am a slave. Born in factory, fathered by science, trained to be a fighter in human wars. I am declared the ultimate soldier. My sergeant says, look right, then to the left. Each face is an exact copy of my own. We are the same height, same build, the same soul. Treat him well, for he is your brother. As my brothers die around me, I wonder if this is all there is. I do my duty, fighting in another war. We move in formation under the hot sun. Do I stand with my brothers and fight, or do I fight alone for our freedom? And the second poem from the same challenge, which I believe published first in Lit Up, is called Cassandra. And this was based off of the ancient myth Cassandra, but it's been updated to a more science fiction theme. In the morning, your ship will be sailing, prepared by your father to whisk you safe. Watch the Silicon City understanding as the people flee the enemy in haste. Now that the last bloody day is dawning, you suffer your secrets within your heart, for none would listen to words of warning. Oh, Cassandra, it is time to depart. Into the fair skies you rocket up, away from the death you have foreseen. In orbit, solar sails prepare to cup waves of photon energy by machine. Sorry, Cassandra, we did not believe. We only saw it as dreams you would weave. And there's that one, short but sweet, I guess. And moving on. Now this one, I blush to say rhymes. You'll have to forgive me. I know rhyming is not exactly cachet these days, but I really wanted to try writing a rhyming poem. And I don't know, it's not perfect, but I like it. It's called Candle on the Water, and it published in Lit Up as well, and same year, 2018. He has no memory of arriving in port. The sea is cruel, using sailors as sport. He serves aboard a merchant ship, seeing the world in a decade trip. Sailing toward a land he may never have seen, the captain he serves is being keen. The profits to be had, there are many. Their full hold will provide a pretty penny. As the storm rises, the crew feels superstitious. Under their hull, the rocks might be vicious. Off in the distance, there is a shimmering light, a candle on the water, a guide through storm's blight. A woman stands on the balcony tower, the storm of the sea gaining in power. Overhead, the lighthouse shines bright. She remains waiting through the night. Although 10 years alone have been stark, by day she tends the lighthouse spark. Each night she ends her duty upon the tower. Never in evening does she shirk or cower. Her youth and bloom are almost gone. If her sailor returns, would his love be forgone? A storm like this had taken her man. Her love remains no matter the span. The sailor rides the crow's nest. Land ho, he proclaims their ending quest. He looks to the lighthouse to guide their vessel. In the shimmering glow, he sees the woman special. Memories explode within. The sailor loses his grip. He clings to the ropes, Esme on his lip. Shame fills his sailor heart for the promises he has broken. Would she forgive him the decade he has forsaken? Paid off and free, he walks the steps of the lighthouse. In his pocket is a ring and the hope of becoming a spouse. He knocks on the heavy door and waits for it to unlock. In the doorway is his beautiful Esme, her face filled with shock. Patrick, is it you? Her voice is trembling and true. Aye, the sailor confesses. He takes in her eyes and tresses. Her hand flashes forward, slapping his cheek. The sailor's eyes water, his motions bleak. He recounts his tale of shipwreck on a beach, of the long years of his memory leech. Remembering his pledge, he pulls forth a ring. If you will still have me, he asks with no sting. She looks at him square in the face. He is not certain she will accept him apace. Then her eyes crinkle in a becoming fashion. She gives him her hand and a nod of passion. Patrick slips the ring on her finger and takes her in his arms. He will remain here, training ships for farms. And that's the end of that one. A little story. But I believe that actually that one was not a challenge. I think that was just something I kind of decided to do on my own. But I think it turned out okay, even though it rhymes, heaven forbid, right? Anyway, I thought now I will go into my book, which of course is The Planets, Sci-Fi Coup, Poetry, there we go, Poetry Collection. And Sci-Fi Coup, for those of you who don't know, is science fiction themed haiku. And it doesn't really follow the strict rules of haiku. I mean, even though we tried to do a 575 syllable count, you're really not required because sometimes scientific terms can be rather long and unwieldy. And so we just aim more for being short. You are not required to put in a kigo or a seasonal word. although if you can, you probably should. I loosely interpret the Kigo as meaning time. So not necessarily a season, because between time travel and everything else that we do in sci-fi coup, let's just say the sakura blossoms don't always work. Let's see. And I think after I read a few of these, I'd like to relate the story of how I learned to write sci-fi coup, because it's an interesting tale. But anyway, these are poems that I have selected not only just to do in general readings at open mics and whatnot, but I'm also illustrating each one to go into my Etsy store as a sci-fi coup poetry print. I haven't finished all of these yet, but as the year goes down, I slowly get them done. But anyway, enough rambling. I'll get to the poetry here. The first one is called Mercury. I circle the sun in spin orbit resonance, lonely messenger. The next one I call Venus Impact. Sulfuric air of Venus burns meteors of certain size. Small rocks need not apply. Next one is Dysphoria. Life springs from the earth. Humans are as seeds on the wind, colonizing worlds. The next one I call Oceanus. We call our home Earth, part of our short-sighted hubris on a world of water. The next one I call Mars. This elderly world, lost global magnetic field, can't hold its breath. The next one is called Canals. Mistaken translation, Italian Canelli creates hope of Martian life. The next one is called Jupiter's Rings. One bright main ring, the halo forms an inner torus, on edge glimmers gossamer dust. Saturn's rings is the next one. Rings spin their own path within the giant disk, mind the Cassini gap. Next is Saturn's attraction. Love is magnetism, as sparks flash in my winds, metallic hydrogen dynamo. Now I'm moving to a moon, which is called Titan. Your deep canyons hold rivers of hydrocarbons. Will we plant our flag? Next is Enceladus geysers. Hot geysers take aim at Saturn's magnetosphere, mingle and merge. Next is Uranus breath. In monotonous teal, methane hides soul of giant, wild winds storm beneath. Next is deep blue world. Methane not the reason, what secret lies beneath of Neptune's royal blue. And the final one from the book I'm going to read is called Planet Pluto. In the Kuiper belt, dwarves mingle with comets. Size doesn't matter. And that's it for these. I have a few more sci-fi coup I thought I would read, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the book and what I was trying to intending with it. Some of the poems are really sci-fi coup because they deal with future events and exploration of the planets. Other of the poems were more just describing the physical attributes of the planets, and other ones were a little bit about the history of who discovered them and some of the circumstances behind it. And it was kind of my goal to place enough clues for the reader, if they're interested enough, to go back and find all the stories behind all these things with the planets, because there's so many interesting things that go back for centuries with each and every one of them. Some of the planets we've only learned about recently. I mean, For instance, with Venus, we may have just discovered that there's life there. And it'll be the first life that we found outside of our own planet, which is very exciting. In fact, I didn't read it tonight, but there is a poem about Venus and the life that might have been there that they knew about even a few years ago. And that inspired one of my sci-fi coup for the planet Venus. Also, I decided for the planets that I would write about the 9 planets I grew up with. I'm a little bit older than some of you out there, I'm sure. And when I grew up, there were 9 planets of our solar system. Now, of course, there is some debate about that. Some people are counting some worlds as being planets and other ones as not. What is it, up to like 22 or something? I don't even pay attention to that anymore. To me, there are 9 planets, and the other ones are either dwarfs or they're asteroids, and they're there, and I don't discount them, but for me, there's 9 planets. And I guess my final poem that I read about planet Pluto, about size doesn't matter, even though that is a little bit of a tweak, it's actually referring to the big debate whether or not the planet Pluto is a planet or not. And for the last few years, they were saying, no, it's a dwarf world, it's not a planet. And there's been a really big upsurge of people fighting against this. And basically, some major scientists are now saying, no, Pluto is a planet and we should designate it as such. And I'm hoping that that philosophy finally wins out in the end. But anyway, I could go on. I'm very fascinated by NASA and astronomy and all that. That's why I write astropoetry, but I know not everybody is intrigued as I am. I think I'm going to go ahead and finish up. Yes, I think this is the last grouping I brought. This is some poems that I published back in 2016, originally in Far Horizons, but this particular quartet of poems has published in, I think, 4 or 5 magazines. The last one was a magazine out of Germany, of all places. And I really think that these particular 4 sci-fi coups are my most popular and bestsellers. Anyway, they all revolve around Tabby Star, which is a star about 1,500 light years from Earth, which has mysteriously been growing dimmer and dimmer over the past century. And one of the ideas of why the star may be getting dimmer is because aliens may be building a structure around their star to obscure it. And I thought that was a really fascinating idea. And that's what inspired this quartet of poems. The first one is called Kick 8462852, which is the designation of Tabby Star. 1,500 light years, human warp drive propels ship. Odd pulses promise life. The next one is called Dyson Swarm. Hold my place forever. Lonely swarm of graphene sails, wireless energy transfer. The next one I called Dyson Ring. One by one we encircle, stalactite self-replicating ring, star energy captured. And the final one of this set is called Abandoned Sphere. Lack of radiation, dead stalactites enclose alien star. We claim all salvage rights. And I believe that is it. Thank you all for listening to my little tiny poems. I appreciate
it. Thank you, Wendy. That was wonderful.
Ah, bless you.
Thank you. I didn't see any questions in chat, but I only just reminded people to post questions here. But since there are only 2 others in this room, I'm going to ask them if they've got questions for you. I will allow them to unmic and ask them. So, but I've got some for you, and let's see, and let me do this. Okay, so it's possible for us to all chat together. I have a question for you.
It's me, Mario.
I'm hearing some, okay. I have a question for you from something you mentioned when we met and spoke before. And I thought you were going to tell us, but you didn't quite. So how did you, so it's two parts. One part is what attracted you? How did you begin to do speculative poetry? And number two, and forgive me if I'm not supposed to reveal this, but you mentioned teaching chemistry, which was, you know, organic was the bane of my existence. Organic is what stopped me from being pre-med. But I want you to first tell us about how you got involved in speculative, and then tell us if that's at all informed by your time in the sciences. So, okay, I'll shut up now.
Well, I don't know. I actually think maybe should I start with the second question first, because
Okay.
maybe that would play in better. Well, yeah, I was a teacher for LA Unified in the inner city
Mm.
when I was first out of college, and my first major was mathematics, and I was planning on starting with mathematics and maybe switching into engineering as a career. And this is, I was so young. I was maybe 18, 17. I really, really young.
Wow.
And I would be showing up to my chemistry lab in class at college with a guitar in one hand and a clarinet in the other. And people would be looking at me going, why are you here? You obviously do not belong. Because I was even then very creative. I was writing stories in a college magazine called The Dimensional Passport. I wasn't writing poetry then, it was just short stories. And I had this dream maybe of being a novelist because I wrote my first novel when I was only 4 or 5 years old. And I did a second novel when I was 17, neither of which will see the light of day. You do not want to see these things. They're really bad. But I keep them because for me, they're mementos and they were a learning experience.
Signs of things to come.
Yes, yes. But eventually I went into filmmaking. But when I graduated college finally with my BA in radio television, and even though I was starting work out in the my field of choice as a freelancer, I mean, I just started pulling cables, eventually worked behind the camera, became a TD, a floor director, and eventually became a producer director of television for many, many years. But to pay for some of this, when I was just first starting out, I decided to teach school
Mm.
because the day ended at 3 o'clock. And then I could go on and do my video work at night. And most of it was at night at that point. And of course, the video production schedule was a lot more intensive in the summer when there was no teaching going on. Um, so I was actually right out of school. I guess I took the test and I scored very high. I guess I was like a 98, 99. So I don't even remember what it was, but evidently it was enough to just hand me a job. Boom, come, we want you.
Ah,
So there was no, even though I don't speak, most teachers need to be bilingual these days. That was not a requirement then. So yeah, they just wanted me. And I was so young. The high school students thought I was another student. I remember a young man propositioning me in the hallway, and I went,
oh,
"Really want to proposition a teacher?" And he went, "Oh."
you're a teacher? Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I to this day I just laugh about that.
That's a,
But yeah, I had a baby face, and I'm very short. I'm only 5'1". And so I guess I had a youthful quality, but I think that's why I related so well. And this was the inner city. These kids went through a lot. I mean, they were from broken homes, a lot of them. A lot of them didn't even aspire even to learn how to read and write, and to try to inspire these people to try to better themselves and to explain, if you can't read and write, if you can't do math, you're not going to go very far in the world, and you need to have these basic skills. And a lot of times they wouldn't listen. I mean, I hate to bring up race, but I am white, and a lot of them were African American or Samoan. Had a wave of Russian immigrants come through too toward the end of my tenure there. But because I was white, they didn't always want to listen to me.
or little or young.
Yeah, yeah, that too. And it was more like the young girls would come out and goes, but you're not even married. Why should I listen to you?
Ah, mm.
My goodness. But I mean, I don't want to go down this road. I did the best I could. And I mean, I know I remember hearing some students reading beautiful poetry in their class, and I would try to say, you know, you really have a talent. You should look into this. And then they'd walk away and they just, maybe it just wasn't something that they wanted to identify with. But they could rap. And the rapping is very difficult when you do it on the street because you do it on the fly. And it takes a lot of talent and a lot of intelligence. Yes. And but to call themselves a poet and to put it on paper,
you're obviously much younger than me if you were kids who were doing rap, because I am the first generation of rap artists. Rap was created when I got out of college. So
but I always thought of rap as poetry that actually made money.
It is. I think it is. But anyway, that was my background. I learned to teach any subject on the fly where I was needed. And when they found out that I had the science background, well, that's it. I was doing science classes. So I taught chemistry, I taught general science, I taught mathematics. I couldn't quite handle the calculus, but I could do the other stuff like algebra and geometry and things of that nature.
So you're an artist
and so I did that for about 5 years, but I was assaulted a few times.
Oh my gosh.
I'm partially blind now in one eye from the assaults.
So sorry to hear that.
And my husband, and of course my boyfriend, was going, I don't want you there. They'll kill you.
Oh.
I don't know. And plus, when I got married, our home was just too far from the school district. And I thought instead of starting with a new school district, I wanted to focus more on my filmmaking, and I wanted to start a new jewelry business. And so that's what I did. And I fully intended to have children, which we didn't have in the end, biology more than any other reason. But I decided I wanted to have a home-based business that I could stay home and be with children until they were of a certain age. And teaching was just, it would not have worked as well, I think. And even with the video that I did, I knew once I had children, I would probably have to curtail a lot of that too, which is why I focused a lot more on the jewelry making. And I became a artisan jeweler I think I did that for about 25 years. I was out and about driving around.
When did you start with the speculative poetry?
Well, that's just it. I never thought of myself as a poet. I mean, I did start a TV show called Coffee House Poetry, where I brought poets in and I turned it into a television show, basically an open mic on TV. But I was not a poet myself. And honestly, they were just so horrible to me that after about 10 episodes, I just gave up. I mean, they were really...
You were the producer and they were bad to you?
I was a producer and director, and they were just really rude to me at all times. I guess I wasn't fast enough with my production or whatever else. And I finally, every time I got a nasty call, I would just sink that much lower. And finally, I told my husband one day, I mean, I never want to work with a poet again as long as I shall ever live. Never will I work.
Now look at you, but now look at you.
This is the irony. That's why I thought I would tell this part first. So I come from this background of science, and I love the space program. I watched Neil Armstrong on the moon when he walked for the first time. I was just a small child, but it made a big impression on me. And so science has always been a really big part of my life. I mean, when my parents urged me to become an engineer, it was not out of the blue. It was because they saw that I loved science. I don't think I have the temperament to be a scientist, though. I'm too I'm out and about too much. I need a lot more variety. Anyway, I became a jeweler. And because of my love of science and science fiction, I was selling my work at science fiction conventions. Here in California, we have many of them. And I became established as a jeweler. And I've probably been selling my wares at sci-fi conventions now for at least a good 20, 25 years. And I'm kind of considered a regular out in the dealer room. But anyway, I had just put my jewelry into one of the art shows at a local con, and I had come out and I realized, there's the ice cream social in about 2 hours. And I'd like to just go have a little ice cream, talk with a few people, and then hit the road and go home. Because I don't stay for the convention since I'm there to work. But I came out and I thought, what can I do? And it was really hot. It was here in California, we have a lot of hot weather. And I just happened to sit down on a bench, and next to me on the bench was a placard, and whatever had been written there before was crossed out, and in handwriting was Sci-Fi Coup Workshop in the room right behind me. And it had been a last minute addition, I guess. And I went, I have no idea what that is, but there's air conditioning inside and cold water. I think I'm going to go in. So I did. And when I went in, I got my water, and I noticed there were a couple of people milling around together in the front of the room. I go, oh, good. There's a few more people here. I don't feel quite alone. So I just took a seat. And all of a sudden, one of the people from the group broke away and went to the front of the room and says, hello, I'm going to be your instructor. And she looked at me and said, I guess you're going to be my only student. I went, wait a minute, who are these other people? And she goes, oh, no, these are not students. These are all editors of national poetry magazines that have come to support me in my class. And I went, huh, okay. And, you have that crawling feeling when you want to just slink away and leave a room real quick. But I felt bad. I didn't want to do that to the lady, because here she was trying to make an impression in front of, I guess, people who were very important to her. And so I sat and she did the class, and she taught me ways to brainstorm poetry. She gave me a method of how to you write the poems, which I now teach actually with my own modifications. But it was all new to me then. And at the end of her instruction, she said, now I'd like you to write a poem. And I went, oh my God, I haven't written a poem since high school. I mean, it has been 20 years. And I was just on the spot to write a poem. And granted, even though Sci-Fi Coup is just 3 lines and short poetry is not necessarily easier.
Well, I know that full well. So
yes. But I went, you know what? I'm a sci-fi writer, and I've read all the classics. I've been reading science fiction since I was a small child. I mean, how hard could this be? That's what I told myself. So I sat down and I wrote the poem. And once I was done, she went, okay, now could you please stand up and read your poem to the class? And I kind of went, what class? It's just me, right? So I went ahead, I stood up, I read my poem, which is now called Airless Night. And it was the first, well, we'll go into that. But I read my poem and I sat back down. And one of the magazine editors leaned over and she goes, I really like your poem. I'd like to buy it and put it in my magazine. I'll pay you. And I went, whoa.
Your first poem.
I mean, literally my first poem that I've ever written. 1 minute later, after I read it out loud, somebody wanted to buy it. And you know what? That made quite an impression on me.
You knew it was
I've been a poet ever since. I mean, sometimes the universe wants to bang you on the head, but this is the way it is.
Yes.
But I still didn't think of myself as a poet. Airless Night went on. I think I got $20 for that one poem, believe it or not.
And you got money.
Yeah. It's for a 3-line poem. And it published, I know it was in Quantum Visions. I think it was also in Far Horizons, and it was also illustrated on my blog. And I decided, since sci-fi coups are so small, that I would just start illustrating them and putting them on my blog. It's just a blog post.
Well, everyone, they're beautiful. Please check out her Etsy store. I covered them. I'm just too poor to buy any, but not all.
We'll work out something.
As me, and you need to support her. Her art is lovely, and it fits the poem. I just think it's so brilliant, Wendy. I mean, I'm so.
I have a couple here. I'll show them in a little bit once we're done.
Show them. So
but that's how it all began, and it was a gradual process. I don't think that I just boom suddenly everywhere. I mean, I just thought of it as a hobby. I never thought of myself really as a poet, not till years later. And I would just put out a little poem on my blog. It's just filler. You know, that's what I thought of it. It's just filler. And eventually, a friend of mine who was doing Quantavisions, the editor, she needed illustrations for her next issue. And I hadn't really submitted to it before. But I said, you know, I have these little poems on my blog. Take a look at them if you like them. I mean, you're welcome to put them in your magazine if you want. Well, she fell in love with them. And she wanted to have 5 or 6 of them. So I had plenty at this point. So I gave some to her to publish. And yeah, and so now every year for the last, I think, 6 years now, 7 years, I've been actually publishing my illustrated poems in her annual magazine. But anyway, the first year that it published, I went to Comic-Con in San Diego because I'm a regular in the art show there as well. And I happened to bring a magazine because I wanted to show it to one of the other artists there who I'm a friend with. And so I showed it to my friend. And she goes, wow, Wendy, these are good. She goes, why aren't they on your table? And I go, well, get out of here. I mean, these are like little drawings. I mean, who would want to? She goes, how do you know? She goes, print out 4 or 5 and put them in the back behind your jewelry.
Good advice.
And see what happens. And I went, okay. I didn't do it that year. It took me another year before I finally did that. And meanwhile, of course, and I had done art before, but I was not as successful with it. I did not sell a lot of them. They were poser generated art, and there's a stigma with CG created art that it's, you know, they think you press a button and the art comes out, which is far from the truth. But there was a real stigma because of that, and my art just never really sold. I'll show you a few examples of the older art too, so you can have a look. But yeah, so I knew how to do limited edition prints. I knew how to set it up in my files. I already had mats, everything I needed except for the actual print, but I had a count already set up. So it was really easy once I decided to do it.
Let's see, please show us.
Oh yeah, here. Now these are ones that are matted. I don't sell them matted on the Etsy store. These are the ones that I put
right there and a little closer.
I will do that. I don't know.
Excellent. Now we can see it clearly.
Hopefully it's readable. Is it backwards?
No, whatever yours is doing, it's flipped it and we see it correctly.
Okay, there's one.
Floating city in purgatory. Find crushing darkness. I love that.
Yeah, it's one of my Venus ones. And then this one goes this way.
Martian hue isn't blue. Rusty skies and morning light color me pink. Oh!
Yes. And then
one more, please. One more. Slingshots to Mars. A hollow asteroid arc. Immigration begin. Oh, yes. Yes. Bravo. Brian's laughing. Did you have any questions for Wendy, Brian? Because you started.
I did, actually.
Sure. I did want to show one of my old ones too, though. But go ahead, Brian, while I just show, because these don't have poems on them. But this is my old style art.
I don't like it as much, though.
It's a bonsai tree.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I mean, as someone who likes to.
This is my poster art that never sold. But there it is. That's an example, anyway. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brian.
Well, basically, as someone who likes to also incorporate a lot of science in their poetry, and also being a fan of space. 2 questions. One, did you ever join the L5 Society?
No, I have not, but I probably should.
I think it's defunct.
What society?
The L5 Society.
L5.
It was around during like the I think the 70s and 80s. I think it's either defunct or it changed into a different organization. I can't remember which one it is now, but they were like dedicated to space colonization.
Yeah, I think they've all shifted their attention to Mars at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you know,
Well,
it's funny. I really think we probably should be looking more closely at Venus because it has a really good sweet spot
mhm.
that would be very easy to colonize if we could float our cities on top of the atmosphere and do the composition of the atmosphere. It would not be that difficult to do. We could probably do it with today's technology.
Right.
But you know, now that they've discovered life there may, if we do, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself.
Mhm.
But if they do, it's going to bring a lot more interest to the planet. But I don't know though. Mars has its qualities too. It's we'll see. I mean, at least we don't have to battle the acid rain and all that.
Yeah, I'm all for O'Neill cylinders myself, but
Oh,
You know, if we're going to go to Mars, we really need to rethink something, which is that in English we have adapted the names of those planets from Greek gods, and I'm sure since both Mars and Venus are visible in the night sky with the naked eye, that other people had other names for them. I'm certain that if we think about it, we don't really want to go to the god of war, and we probably should go to the god of love, but we shouldn't be tempted to go there if it's the wrong place.
right.
I don't know.
Love, but she's the one that's hot, right?
Oh yeah, she's hot.
Wendy had a question, and I'll read it to you, Wendy. From Wendy to Wendy. Wendy Lowe's question, and Wendy is in our series too, folks. So she's later on. What do you think you found in the haiku form that expresses something you might not be able to express as well in other modes?
And I just want to add that I think you have a real feel for that form. So it really came through.
You know, I've always had an affinity for what I call small spaces. I used to code virtual reality worlds.
Oh, dear.
But they were all text-based. It was like living inside a novel. But the term is goddess. That was my title, because I was the owner of the game. And I basically did all the building myself. And I found when I built my world, before the players came, and I think I had up to like 600 players at one point in my game. Wow. But yeah, it was we were around for about 6 years, but a lot of politics, not politics in the real world thing, but inner politics went on, and I just don't want to, if anyone's out there, I don't want to get started with that. But I found when I was building my world, I loved to create little places for people to discover that were rich with code and with triggers that they could do things to incorporate into their own stories. And that was just kind of my forte. So, and I would hire a coder to come in to do the big stuff, but I knew enough coding of my own that I could handle the smaller stuff out there, the less complicated code. And I think sci-fi coup, in a sense, is like that to me. I have more trouble writing longer poems than I do with the short poems. I don't know if it's because of the way that you can imply a lot with a single word or with a small phrase. And when I compose sci-fi coup or short astropoetry, I find the phrases just tumble out of me, out of my subconscious. I'm a very intuitive writer anyway, and I don't really, I research a lot before I write, and the ideas come in.
Say hi.
And then when I'm sitting there with my pen and my notebook, I write with a fountain pen, by the way, when I do my poetry, the words just come out. And I will do, when I'm really in a groove, I could do anywhere from 6 to 8 poems in an afternoon, and they'll be fine. And I like to compose my sci-fi coup in groups of 4, because I find that, or even more than that, sometimes 5 or 6, because I find when a magazine wants to publish it, they like to have enough to fill up at least 1 page. And so when I do that, they have enough to put in with a graphic, and it fills up a page very nicely. even though they're individual poems.
Well, they also seem to sometimes come in sets where they build on each other, which is nice. But I think what you said about smallness, I get. I think you also, what you said about surprises applies to what you do with your haiku, because there are little ahas in there, and in that brief space to get a little aha is very satisfying.
Yes, yeah, that's what I like about it. I that's just something that I like to do naturally. If there isn't that kind of evocation of emotion, then to me, it just doesn't, it's not worth bothering with. The very first poem I wrote in that class had the implication of a slamming of a door and death at the very end. And it was one word, but it was enough to invoke all of this. And I think that's what caught the attention of the publisher. I didn't know what I was doing at the time. Maybe I still don't, I don't know. But it just, that's the way it comes out of me. And I don't dwell on it. And I like to write in sets too, because as an artist, I'm trained to do things in sets. When you create a piece of art, you don't want to do one piece of art. You want to do 4 or 5 that would work together, because then the customer might buy more from you. If they like one piece, they go, oh, but this would be a whole ensemble for my wall, and they'll buy all of them. I've had that happen with my sci-fi coup art, because I'll put up like 4 sketches about the planet Jupiter, and if somebody comes in who likes that planet and likes even one of the poems, they'll generally buy all 4, and they'll have a set for their wall. And yeah, my poetry tends to sell a lot to scientists, or to the relatives of scientists that are desperately looking for Christmas gifts. I remember one lady came up and says, why don't you do one about Saturn? My nephew is working in JPL and he studies Saturn. I need a poem about that for Christmas. So that's what, so now I'm going to try to get one at least done, at least for her one day. And then I had another time I was at San Diego Comic-Con, and one of the volunteers that was assigned to me looked like a kid. I thought he was a high school student, honest. He looked so young. And he comes and he sees my work and he goes, oh, and he looked at the Kick 892 and he goes, oh, that's Tammy Star. And I go, you know what that is? And he goes, oh yeah. And then he started talking about Dyson spheres and all this. And I go, oh, and I go, what do you do for a living? And he goes, oh, I'm a physicist at JPL. Oh, well, so he was very interested to learn when I told him I had my book coming up in the next year. So hopefully he bought one. We'll see. Wow. But these are the sort of people that my work appeals to, and I admit it's not a huge market, but what the heck, it's fine.
Okay, I have a funny little anecdote. I work in a store part-time, and we have a very slow old machine, because it's a small family business. And so I joke sometimes that, you'll have to wait. This machine sends all this information to Mars for encryption in Martian, because the Russians haven't been able to hack Martian yet. So, it's very secure, but it's a little slow. Please be patient. And the store is quite close to the University of Rochester, and one guy looked at me and he said, well, if it was going to Mars and coming back, it would take at least 20 minutes.
Right.
He says,
write that.
I'm an astrophysicist, and I'm like, oh God, you got me.
You gotta be careful. They'll come back and bite you. That's true. That's
you got me. I was lying.
I know, but that's one thing about writing science fiction. You have to be careful about. You have to get the science right, because the geeks and nerds will hunt you down if you don't. So. I gotta go, yeah. But this was wonderful. I really have to get going now.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, Bryant. Also, I listened to yours online because I glitched and didn't make it last time, but your stuff is wonderful too. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
I'm looking forward to hearing yours.
Wendy, and
nice to see you.
The other Wendy will be later on.
We'll call you someday.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay.
Actually, I do have one question. One other question for Wendy. And it's maybe it's a bit of a megalomaniacal question. What role, well, actually, can or should poetry in this day and age actually be used to inspire people to either explore the sciences or explore space or any part of it?
Actually, that is my number one reason for writing. I think it does. I think our whole world has come about because of science fiction and the ideas expressed there. I do know of engineers that go thumbing through science fiction books looking for ideas that they can develop and make money on, basically piggybacking on the ideas of the writers. There's no law that prevents them, right? There's an old saying that says Heinlein was there first. He wrote about things like cell phones in the boot. If you read Space Cadet, Tex, one of his main characters, didn't want to be bothered by his cell phone, so he kept it in his boot. And at the time, there was no such thing as a cell phone. Now, of course, we all do things like that, right? He wrote about water beds, about screens of such size that they would be like windows onto the world, just like our giant televisions are today. But
telepresence too, right?
If you look at Mel Gibson and his cyberpunk novel, a lot of what we do now with the technology, you can look back in his books and find the basis of the ideas. Even some of the names that we use for things go back to his book. If you read it now, you're going, oh, but this is very commonplace. But no, it didn't exist when he wrote it. He actually created the concepts. So I don't know if as a poet that I'm going to be having this much impact as some of the novelists have done. It'd certainly be nice if it did. Who knows what's going to happen? Poetry is becoming so popular lately. It's skyrocketing. I think the last time I went to a publisher's convention that they said poetry books were like at 17% of all sales of books or something. I mean, it was just some outrageously high number because, as long as I can remember, very few people bought poetry books. But now so many people are that the publishers are viewing a poetry collection as they would an anthology or a collection of short stories. Basically in the same way, because there is a market for it now. People like shorter stories and fiction that they can read quickly on their phones or when they're out and about. And poetry is just ideal for that because you get so much impact in such a tiny little space and for a quick read. And so I think the future is bright for poets. I mean, look at the Insta poets on Instagram and how well they've been doing. I've talked to a couple of poets that are making a very comfortable living on their poetry.
Insta poets?
Let's hope it happens for all of us, But for me, poetry, even though I now call myself an author and poet, I will own to the moniker, even though back in the day I did swear I will never work with a poet again. I have become my own nemesis in that regard. But who knows, maybe now because I am a poet, maybe if I had been back then, maybe those poets would not have been quite so snarly at me. They probably viewed me as an outsider, quote unquote, using their talent or however they perceived it. I did the same thing for musicians for 5 or 6 years with my Musician Discovery series, and the musicians understood the value of television exposure.
Wendy, we're heading toward the end of our time.
I'm sorry. We're rattling on there.
No, that's okay. Because it's lovely to hear the writer talk about the whole context from which they create. But Brian had another question, I thought.
That was the one about the poetry as inspiration for actually wonder with not just with the sciences, but actually being able to inspire people to do that exploration of physics, of space, of the whole 9 yards. You hear so little of it nowadays. But when I made the comment about rap being poetry that actually turned a profit,
yes,
it turns a profit because it seems like it there's a rhythm to it, but it has messages that people understand and it appeals to
and apprehend quickly. But see,
and apprehend quickly, yeah.
Here's the thing. I'll say this not to take us too far afield I'm older, and I remember there was a poet named Rod McEwen who made like millions of dollars off of his poetry. So if you check him out in Wiki, Rod McEwen made tons of money decades before any of this. And it's McKeun, and not that I'm recommending him, just to say that it's mainly America's fashion or lack of fashion. If we talk about poets being prized or even making money in other countries, in other cultures, the role of the poet is way more central than it has been in our particular society. So I feel like we're just catching up with world culture as we begin to prize, treasure, value, and pay for the poet's creations.
I agree with that. That's
Absolutely.
a wonderful statement. Absolutely.
So, thank you, Wendy, for being here. Thank you, Bryant, for being number one and number two. This is
thing one, thing two.
I didn't say that, but I treasure you both so much. I am so grateful for your participation in Speculative Sundays, where we are also trying to promote and present those creators of possibilities, of dreams. And so I thank you for engaging in this hard and wonderful work and for being here. And hopefully you audience, while the audience here is small, I know we're also on Facebook. So thank you folks on Facebook who I'm just not skilled enough to look at the same time. Hopefully I'll get there as well. I thank you all for being here. Have a wonderful week. Stay safe, stay well. And again, thank you, Wendy Van Camp, for sharing your work.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Have a good one, folks.